Well, on Saturday night, we would come to Friendsville for groceries. And then on Tuesday, a train came into Friendsville from Confluence, and we sold 8-gallon can of cream. And we brought that to Friendsville, and it would go on the train. And then on Saturday night, when we came, we'd buy groceries. About all we needed was sugar and salt and flour, and well, not much flour because the grist mill was here in town. And my father would bring grain down and have it ground, like for flour, and different flour, buckwheat flour, because he loved his buckwheat cakes in the wintertime. And yeah, I can remember way back, I heard her telling of all the stores and things. And Red Jenkins had a bar down on the river, and then down from that was the theater, which we would come to on Wednesday nights. And they gave carnival glass away. They'd give you a glass or something like that, some article of the carnival glass. They'd give you a plate or something, but we would always come on Wednesday night. And they give you a little card out about that long that had the name of the movies that was going to be on, and then we picked ones we liked. And my dad liked the movies, and we would come there every Wednesday night. And yes, the train came into Friendsville, and of course then, well, I have in here, John Friend Sr. was in the post office, and then the theater came, and it was down from where Red Jenkins's bar was. All I knew of his name was Red Jenkins. I don't know what his real name was, but it was Red Jenkins, and he had the bar there. I heard her say about the fights in Friendsville, they had a lot of fights. In fact, someone hung up, and they said they hung Tom Dooley. They hung filled it with straw, on the street.
That wasn't very nice.
No, but Friendsville, it wasn't a very large farm, but it was enough for us to raise what we needed. And like, cows, and we had horses, and we didn't have any tractor back in those days, We rode the horses and did everything with horse. And yeah, but I had a good life, and always had plenty to eat, and a nice warm house to stay in, and that meant a lot back in those days.
Oh.
My father had an old Model T.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, he had a Model T. It was it had a back seat to it. It was a two-seated Model T. And then the next car he got was a 1936 Ford. No, I'm telling you wrong. He had another, and it was older than that. It was a four-door, and he was always a Ford man. But anyway, my dad went to West Virginia whenever the timber was going off of Cheat Mountain, and that's where he met my mother, and she was a cook at the camp. And yeah, she was a good took my husband off. I told me, when you can cook like your mother, you'll be a cook. They used to butcher like beef in the fall, and then about 4 or 5 hogs. And we always had, and he cured the meat, smoked the sausage, and cured the ham in salt, in barrels with salt. When it floated a potato, then he could put the meat in. And oh, it was delicious. She'd fry that ham, and yeah, we always had the good meals. And then my father was one. He always had a couple hired hands because in the wintertime he cut timber, and they hauled it to Uniontown to post up the mines. And so she had to cook 3 meals a day. We always had 2 gardens. We had a big truck batch, we called it. And yeah. And
So
we worked the fields, We had to go out and work the hay. We had an old thing that caught the hay. It was a hay rake haul, a big thing, and you tripped it with your foot. You had to make sure you tripped it every time at the same place when it come around to the windrow. And it was all horses. We had no tractors at that time.
And what was...
Oh, well, I like to work outside. I'd like to tramp the hay wagons and work anything outside. And my older sister, she didn't, so she did the inside. I know we found lots of flint heads where the Indians were right there, and he would tell a story of his great his great-grandmother, their family, she was just a girl, his great-grandmother was, and the Indians came and they killed her father and mother, and she ran to the woodshed and hid, so she was saved, and she didn't get.
Wow.
We didn't have much freedom. It was just home, you know. We didn't have any neighbors too close, maybe a mile away, and we just made our own enjoyment at home. You know what we had, and we were pretty busy all the time with the farm. We had wood to cut. When I come home from school, I'd cut a load of wood and bring it in for kindling, you know, and wood. We had a wood box back of the stove. We always filled a wood box, and we had milking to do, and I helped, you know, do that. I can remember, I think I was about 5 years old when I learned to milk, and that was hard. I couldn't get the milk out. Isn't it funny how you remember those things? About the only time we got to swing in our swing, he put a swing up in the old apple tree,
Mm-hmm.
and we would swing in the swing. We'd hurry up and eat we called it breakfast, dinner, and supper. And when we ate our dinner, we'd hurry up and eat our dinner so we could go out and swing in the swing. I know my father bought that other farm out there for 50 cents an acre. I don't know what he paid for the home place, but I remember that he bought the Walls farm out there for 50 cents an acre. They had, my father had bought a pony for my brother, and they had to walk about 1.5 miles out to catch the school bus out in the cove. And he would ride his pony to school, and then he'd send it back, and it'd come home. Of course, it wouldn't go after him then in the evening, but our living back there was entirely different what it is. I mean, my girls can't believe that we we had to carry our water from the spring, and we heated in a big old copper, a kettle that, no, it wasn't a kettle. It was a big copper thing about this big, you know, and about that deep. We had to carry water and heat it in that. And we took a bath in the wash tub by the stove, and somebody stood at the kitchen door and watched others didn't come in. And then my father got one of his uncles come, and there was a spring up above the house at what they watered the cattle and the horses. He had a big watering trough up there. So he had him dig a ditch. He came, and he didn't have much place to go. So Dad told him if he would dig a ditch, you know, to pipe the water down in the house, and it was high enough up that the water gravity came to the upstairs. So then Dad put a bathroom in, and we had a bathroom. Electric, but you know what we had in our house at home? We had a big carbide plant. I don't know if you ever heard of those or not. But it was a huge tank you put out in the yard, and it was down, it was about this big around and then deep into the yard. And we'd fill it with carbide about every 6 months. And then we carried water and shellacked that. Well, that performed gas, and it piped it into the house. We never had lamps. We never had oil lamps or anything in the house. And we had, they were beautiful shades. I don't know whatever happened to them. Like, it was over these lights, and there was a flint on them, and all you had to do was turn the gas on and flick the flint. And they did. That's what we had in our house. We never had.
Wow.
Mom and Dad was always one that wanted, and when electric came, you know, we didn't have electric or anything. And for us to get electric, the farm that was next to us, he wouldn't let them come across. He wouldn't let them put poles in. My father had offered to pay his electric bill for a year, but he said, no, they're not putting poles on my land. So my dad had to, they brought it up from an accident came down over the hill, and then we lived up on the next hill, and that's how we got electric in. He got, when television first came out, I just can't remember the year it did, but he got that, and then we had an aerial, but we only could get about 3 stations. We could get Pittsburgh, Channel 4 and Channel 2, and I think a Johnstown station. That's all we could get. And the big aerial was up on the roof, and then he had to go out and turn it when we wanted to watch another station. But we had a radio, and how we had a, you know, it was battery charged. Well, he put up a windmill out in the field from our house, and that, when, you know, he would charge the battery. But we had to be careful. We didn't get to watch too much or listen to too much on television only. But we listened to Jack Benny and, you know, those old ones back then. And Dad,
Sounds like
when
you-
something new came out, he was very interested in it, and he wanted to get it. And he did. Yeah. Well, and Dad, he said he liked this bull and he thought it wasn't cross. And Mom kept telling him, because it kept pawing. It'd come out, you know, and it'd paw the dirt. And she kept telling him, you better watch that bull. So I was sitting on the steps of the kitchen steps outside, and the old bull had run up to the watering trough to get water. Well, Dad went up and he was kind of wanting to make over the bull or something. Well, then he turned around and started back, and I saw that old bull take after him. And Woodrow was in the kitchen, and I hollered at Woodrow. I said, Woodrow, that old bull's after Dad. Well, he came running out quick, but lucky enough, my dad, he heard me holler, and he turned around and saw the old bull coming. So he ran to the fence, and he just got over the fence post, and the old bull come back and hit the fence post. His one leg was still hanging over the fence post, but the bull missed it. Now, he would have smashed his leg, or he might have killed him that time, you know. After that, he pinned him up at the barn and then sold him.
Oh, that's-
Oh, yeah, we always had a good old dog, but Dad didn't allow animals in the house, so we would sneak the cat in, you know, keep the cat in the house. But the dog was the only time the dog got in the house, an old panther came through, and they screamed like a woman, you know. So the dog he was laying out there probably on the kitchen door steps or something, but boy, he came in the house, he came through and screamed when that old panther.
A panther, a
It was
mountain
a
lion.
panther, yeah.
Wow.
They travel through every once in a while, but not too often.
And did you live in Garrett County your whole life?
All my whole life, my husband always said we was born and raised here and never had sense enough to leave.